Good morning. We're here at Preacher's Space in Austin to showcase a few of the pieces that made this project successful. It was a great team. It's one of my favorite projects by far. We're here with Rob Baird with Preacher and David Clark with Kartwheel. So I'd like to take a minute, Rob, if you can tell us a little bit about Preacher and yourself.
Yeah, sure. Preacher's a creative agency here in Austin, Texas, advertising and design experiences. We've been at it for about 8 years now. This project came about because honestly we had the good fortune to outgrow our previous space and maybe some of our initial ambitions in the first years, and it was time to make a new home for our work family, so we're really amazed with how it came out, and so thankful that we all got to work together on this.
Great, thank you. Yeah, David, if you'll share a little bit about yourself. I mean, that was part of the way our introduction came about.
Right.
Getting to know you. You
do
some beautiful work. So.
Yeah, thank you. Kartwheel Studio, interiors and architecture. And the relationship, I had the pleasure of working and meeting with Rob to do their first space. Preacher and I had worked a lot together for many different types of projects, from projects that they've designed and brought to clients to the table, as well as us doing their previous home that they had the grace of growing out of and moving up and becoming what they are. So we designed the space with them, and then brought you guys to the table to get a shot at building it. Yeah,
thank you. And there's so many creative elements of this project, and kind of thinking back through the timeline of like everything that took place. I mean, it was a lot to kind of pack in, and I think the team worked really cohesively together. So You can kind of talk about, you touched on it earlier, but the need for this space, like really from a Preacher standpoint, what drove this, your site selection? And
Sure. I mean, one thing is we knew, regardless of if it was one floor or 2 floors or what the actual physical space was, that we wanted one area to be predominantly almost like hospitality. We realized that's how a lot of our clients were interacting with us. They would come to the Preacher offices and not want to leave, which is a good thing. So we're like, well, let's see if we can't make it feel even more like it's got some semblance of, a hotel meets a co-working space meets a hospitality. And then I think we also wanted to make sure that our actual workspaces could allow for more of the kinds of work we were doing. It wasn't just advertising and design. We were doing a lot of our own little shoots and production, so we wanted space for that. We've been running an art gallery ever since we started Preacher, which kind of came out of some value engineering with David on the past project of what do we do with this windowless space, that the more we cleared away debris, the more we realized there was a beautiful potential for some big walls and another art gallery in town. To some new endeavors, like a recording studio. Obviously, it's always been dubbed the live music capital of the world, and we've done a lot of work with bands for music videos and album designs. We're like, could we step that up a little bit and actually provide a home to make it more affordable and easy for people to maybe record their albums, and then just a lot of internal making, a making studio, physically, editorially. There was just a lot of things we were doing quite often in other spaces around town that we wished we could do at home. So we kind of needed a 2-part place where it's hospitality, as it turned out, on one floor, and the sort of making and creating engine on the second floor, and making those all feel coherent and like they're working together, not like it's actually two different realms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, David, I'd love to kind of segue into talking through some of the early design and how that all came to life from your perspective.
As I mentioned, Preacher and I've worked together a lot. I know the company really well, as I was with them at the day one of them signing their first lease in Austin. So the floor planning and needing to go through the discovery phase of what the company is already existed. That's from our relationship previously. And so we thankfully hit the ground running, and that's why we continue to work together a lot, is because we know each other really well. And back to Rob's point, which, the way that they work with their clients a lot was a more hospitality forward experience. And but at the same time, having the size company that they have, there's a lot of desks and there's a lot of people, and that means that there's a lot of associated functionality that doesn't necessarily get brought to the forefront. So we're always going to be working with the spaces that we're given, right? To a degree, it's not like this is a adaptive reuse building. Prior to this office, it was a trade school for welding, and was pretty much a metal barn, and it had tin metal siding and structural steel framing over it. So it was a raw space. The space that we see now is nowhere, is far from where it was when we got our hands on it. To speak to the design process and working with where we landed, hospitality forward on the first floor, which means that we've got conference rooms downstairs, the art galleries downstairs, a kitchen space that can host out of is downstairs, as well as the recording studio, and then the space that we're sitting in now. And then putting most of the workstations or the primary workstations upstairs that allows for the clutter of our daily lives to be more on display, allowing the space to be what it is versus trying to manipulate a space and act like we're not working all the time and having everybody has mess. No matter how OCD you are. And, and with that, we wanted the two to work together in that way.
Yeah.
So by putting the workstations on the second floor is where that thought process came.
Cool.
Yeah.
We were brought in, I'd say, at a test fit stage where we had kind of some inspirational ideas of where the space needed to go. Our relationship developed a lot, I would say, through that first 2 or 3 months where,
Yep.
We got tasked with putting a budget together and then putting a schedule together. And there were different components of that where I really had to kind of get in your head and with your team, with Amanda, us really collaborating and shaping the whole
Yep.
project from the start all the way through that process. A few things stand out. I think we were working in a building that was essentially under construction.
Correct.
And so we were able to kind of navigate that process together, understanding what we were going to be handed when they were finished, and then essentially taking it from that point forward. So I think we overcame any perceived challenges pretty quickly. We had to. We were moving pretty streamlined through. But from your team's standpoint, did you face any things that started as challenges? Because I feel like we turned that stuff into opportunities for us to
I think we did, because naturally not every single thing is going to go according to plan. But as a kudos to y'all and to the Kartwheel team, I feel like the spirit and ambition and the assumed result never changed. But if you think about it, I hadn't thought about this till just now. We were also doing this as COVID was coming upon.
Yeah.
And so in some ways that's a massive challenge, and in some ways fortunate that we were able to make some moves to how we assumed people might use the space going forward with a little bit of an unknown future. What's that going to be like in the way of everything from designing enough work and call rooms upstairs that everything is teched up with video screens for video conferencing and whatnot, without losing the soul of a place that's intended to feel much more like people working together. That was a challenge that I think you guys overcame through some materials and color and lighting choices, all the way to even just some of the design build. I feel like it took on a slightly new life that I would now have wanted, even if we weren't facing how do we keep people a little more separate at times.
Right.
Or it kind of hits that perfect balance between open working space and actually really homey, communal, but smaller breakout moments. So I think that was a pretty great thing to be able to do it together in real time as you're watching the news, looking at architectural plans, taking on some budgetary challenges, all the supply chain, all the things everybody's been dealing with in their given creative projects. We were just doing this massive creative project. And so in a way, I think that just really humble, roll up our sleeves together and do it actually made the place better than if we had done it 3 years ago before the world changed.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, you started to touch on that we were working with a building that the envelope or the shell of the building was being constructed by another team, which opens a whole entire can of worms, as you know, of navigating all of those teams and what the associated deliverables are, and as that team has unforeseen challenges as well. And so navigating that into a kudos, to Pravo is jumping into the MEP stuff, which is one of the bigger areas that I think that we had unknowns showing up of what was being delivered, how it was being delivered, and then tying into that. And I think that navigating those hurdles was extremely fluid, considering the potential outcome of what the hurdles could have been, or additional hurdles could have shown up by lack of organization, poor communication, not having foresight with experience, that we actually came out of it, I would say, thankfully scotch-free, and with the product that has a huge amount of opportunity for collision and really could have dictated a lot of redesign given the circumstances. So in that way, I think it was moving through it. I didn't necessarily acknowledge it as much as looking back at the project now, as I'm even sitting here looking at HVAC systems running through this space of like, y'all, it seamlessly dodged a lot of hurdles, literally.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
A few things come to mind when we talk about some of those details is, your team put the right responsibility in the right places. And what that creates is a sense of ownership. And so that started, I think, with budget. We knew that we needed to get X amount of things done within this, set parameter from a financial standpoint. And your team being really communicative about that. Sometimes clients hold that to the chest, and it doesn't allow everybody to go and make those decisions, right? And the second thing that I think that leads into is being good stewards of the client and of the project,
right,
where you and I were always on the same page through pre-construction. And then I think our team stayed on a really collaborative page with you through construction, because as something like this comes to life, I mean, everything in here is custom.
Yeah.
But we maintained a really tight budget. We were transparent with all of those things, which allowed everybody to sit down. One thing that I really loved about that process is like some of those issues sometimes can take weeks or months to get sorted out.
Yeah.
I think everybody's mindset, you said roll up their sleeves, everybody's mindset was like, we need to resolve this by Friday in order for us to do that. And in order to do that, you can't tell somebody that on Thursday. You need to tell them that on Monday and put the information forward. So
sure.
I learned a lot, honestly, through that. And I've seen a lot of different types of things get built through my career. This is by far one of my favorite projects, and for so many reasons. So super grateful for that, and the relationship I think will end up leading to more of that in the future.
Yeah. I think we were somewhat fortunate, we as Preacher, in that we had done so many different kinds of projects with David. We did it in Kartwheel. It wasn't just our first, office home. We also worked on client work as disparate as an experiential, build out for a whiskey company that has to be able to pack up on an 18-wheel trailer but feel like you're in an indoor-outdoor bar, all the way to, design build out of more kind of like retail and hospitality spaces for experiential events and stuff. And so those come with a lot of challenges that you kind of have a working relationship of knowing like, hey, we can always find a way, if the budget changes a little bit or the timing changes a little bit, to still hang on to the soul and the concept of the idea that you're going for. And I think that's a helpful thing that all three entities had. At the end of the day, you're always kind of, it's like what we do in our business, going back to the brief, or are we still on brief for what we're doing? It doesn't have to be the exact way and thing and shape that you thought every little moment was going to be. But then when I sit in here now, and like you said, so much of it is custom and so much of it stayed exactly as planned, but even the things that had to evolve, it all still hit the brief that we were going for, and then some, where you look around and you're like, it feels perfect. It feels like us, because we all bought in and stayed tight on that together, which I think is a big deal in a build partner. It's like it didn't feel like it truly felt like three different creative companies, even though your specialties, sometimes do have to get a little more brass tacks. I don't guess you actually use brass tacks in building, but you know what I mean?
I like that, though. You're super practical when it comes to building things, and you have a lot of experience when it comes to that. The piece that comes to mind as you're kind of telling that story is the way we had to relate this to subcontractors. We really had, I definitely had to tell them that story of, this is a different type of client. We need to think outside the box. What we see now and what we put in place in the field in 6 months, that thing is going to transition. And so again, going back to really thinking forward and being proactive and putting solutions in place, down to, essentially looking at the space very differently in terms of like recording studio that came in late into the program.
Yeah.
We had to permit that Did we permit it separately?
Separately.
We permitted that separately, looking at how the art gallery worked from kind of a city code perspective,
Yep.
the offices, the restrooms. And so, again, I go back to collaboration and just kind of respect for everybody's discipline there.
Yeah, the art gallery is a good example, actually, because it's going to be white walls and beautiful lights and open space. But when we had some permitting issues that changed how it actually had to physically exist, I actually think it got better, but with a really, really clever redesign from David and the Kartwheel team, and then how you guys were able to implement that on our budget, knowing that we didn't suddenly have $100,000 more for an art gallery, but we were able to actually make an experience that, after and now hosting our first show in there, have gotten so much feedback of how much lovelier the experience is. When it's time to actually look at and experience the art, you're really in it in a unique way, and you can really get people flowing through and taking in the artwork, and then having the celebration of it, and the art party, if you will, isn't colliding. And we used to have that happen at the past space. There was just no other way. It's one big open box, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's another example where it wasn't just like, this is how we can make it fit to code. It's like, let's actually think about this. If one of the pieces of feedback we got in the old space that we could improve upon here in real time was people felt like the celebration of the art and the artist and the looking at the art kind of collided at times, as the popularity of the gallery grew. This is a chance to change that, and it really helped. So we actually got to do the first test of it, and it's a better experience.
Yeah.
Born out of code issue.
Right.
Born out of code.
Right.
So
exactly.
So Rob, going through an experience like this and building something of this magnitude, what advice would you give other groups, going through the same thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's going to sound like a little bit of a creative cliche, but I think trust in the expertise of folks that you're working with. You can imagine in our industry, where it is a creative industry, you almost want to have your hands in a little bit of everything. And I think we learned some really good lessons that when we let Pravo and your team bring your expertise to an agreed vision, and of course, like David and the Kartwheel design team do the same. And let everybody have their room to take a simple idea that we've all agreed upon, and then bring their magic to it. It comes out much better than if you're trying to micro manage it. It's the same whether we're making a commercial and we got to trust the director, or we're painting signage and we got to trust the artist that's painting the signage. It makes such a difference when you really do empower people to bring their love to it. And I think that this was a little bit of a labor of love,
Totally.
Obviously it had to hit budgets and codes and some pretty high ambitions through a tricky time to be building anything. But at the end of the day, you could feel that we were all loving the ambition and what this could be. And I think that as the client, you do just have to trust, because that's the only way you get surprised with the people that you've partnered with. You know where your limitations are. So if you can kind of get out of your own way and let people kind of bring their own magic into it, you get such a much better result. And kind of like we were talking about before, if you really do have kind of a clear vision or if you will, concept for what it's going to be, versus just adjectives if we want it to look beautiful.
Right.
Like if you can have a little bit of an idea, and it doesn't have to be as specific maybe as ours was, it helps everybody be on that same page from the start, and then you get something back that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Rob, you call it trust, and I call it like educated safety. And it's a way that, like, I think for the having experience and in the build industry and in the design side of the build industry as well, it's easy for me to understand jargon and know the hurdles. And Rob has, and I've set along a lot of projects together, but he's never been the one, and nor would he be the one, because it's not his focus to focus on MEP stuff and structural stuff and the nuances of projects that create serious challenges at certain times. And I think that what I thought that you guys did really well along the way throughout was continually showing up and educating the team, the client along the way. And it's not just reassurance of no, I promise you we got this, but in a way that moving through the process with them, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, stewarding a project across the finish line, I think is a huge part of it. And so one of the biggest parts really is budget always comes out as the first word in regards of construction these days, and has been forever and a day. But at the end of the day, the one thing that is not mentioned very often is that construction projects are typically long durations of time. I think that I think we logged somewhere around 18 months together, and I was working with you guys on a daily basis, and I was speaking with sometimes on multiple times a day basis throughout those 18 months. And that relationship is critical to how one feels at the end of the day. And that means how a project's going or not going at the end of the day. And so I think that is, there's a beautiful product at the end result. But there's one of the most unspoken things is going to be how that relationship works as a team. And I think that's a huge value that you guys brought to the table that allowed for the quality to show up.
It really was a collaboration, I think, between three companies where there was like a healthy amount of overlap and shared ambition that made it feel like a big super team, because it was we had some big challenges, and I do feel like what y'all brought to the table wasn't just execution. It was actually ideas. It was actually buying into the vision that was kind of put before all of us, and I hope for not just the Pravo team, but the way you mentioned the subcontractors, the collective team as it went through each phase, getting to come in here sometimes and just see progress and just pick up the vibes of the project. Yeah. It felt like everybody was kind of enjoying that we were doing some things a little differently. Yeah. A little bit of, from a creative standpoint, maybe wrong things done right. It kind of felt like everybody was having a little extra. It's an atypical project, but maybe lots of people these days want a slightly atypical project. And if you can find a construction team that actually embraces that and is excited for that versus, man, this is going to be more trouble than it's seemingly worth. And then, that's how you get to something I think that wows people at the end, which is certainly how we feel very gratefully and humbly that we've got this space to come into every day that, is re-energizing longtime employees and, awing and making slightly nervous new employees, by the living up to a creative space like this as a creative company. And I don't think we would have had it if our construction partner hadn't actually acted like a truly creative entity.
Right.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. That's true.
I think trust and gratitude are foundational pieces for us.
Yeah.
And not that it always hasn't been that way, but it's something that a couple of years ago we sat down and kind of looked fundamentally like, how do we need to interact with our clients and our partners? And those two things are common threads constantly. This project, I think, allowed like the spirit and the soul of that to come out. And you feel that when you walk in the front door, You can go throw in a law office in a high-rise downtown. Like you don't really think outside the box. It's really kind of the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a manufacturing process, where here there was a lot of thought into like the reclaimed wood siding or the custom conference room glass walls or just all of those elements. Yeah, we did have to kind of make sure that everybody was on that same page. But I felt the same thing when I came in here. I was like, this place has a spirit about it. And so again, I said we're grateful earlier. Like this process was awesome. You were both really great to work with. Your teams were great to work with. Thank you for taking time to sit down and do an interview now and talk about
Pleasure.
Some stuff. Yeah.
Any excuse to hang out in here.
Yeah, no kidding. Well,
there's a reason why we have you bidding on other projects.
We appreciate that too.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you taking time. Talk to you soon.